Hi, this is Steve Young, a Global Executive Director of the Co-Roundtable for Moral Capitalism, with a second vignette, if you will, on some thoughts and concerns which have arisen in our thinking and our discussion because of the pandemic, because of COVID-19 coronavirus. What I'd like to reflect on now is the responsibility, the prudent and wise use of its powers by governments, particularly the American government, in stepping up to offset the economic impacts, the negative economic impacts of closing down economies. People have to stay home. Stores are put on lockdown. Unemployment in the United States is as highest it's going right now. This is in mid-May. It's as high perhaps as in the Great Depression, which I was always taught as a young person was like a historic anomaly of all these people out of work. Well, we got it again. And people not having money, not having extra cash. The federal government, our federal government's passed legislation, and more is coming, $2 trillion in dollar value of government aid in various ways to people, to businesses, to communities, to get them through, to absorb the risk financially of what's happened to people. And then I haven't seen the numbers, but the Federal Reserve System, our Federal Reserve System, is creating a lot of liquidity by buying up treasuries, buying up corporate debt, promising loans to all kinds of companies. In other words, the political system is carrying the economy, not the economy itself. And this translates into debt, or maybe not debt. Clearly, it translates into more liquidity, which is sort of spendable chits in the economy by trillions of dollars. Traditionally, people would have panicked because this would have meant incredible inflation and huge debts that our children and grandchildren would have to pay. There hasn't been that panic yet. One reason is there's a theory called modern monetary theory, which argues that under certain conditions, certain governments, like the United States, which have reserve currencies, in periods of very low interest rates, and the interest rates are low because there's so much money out there, that governments can essentially print money as much as they want, and they just distribute the money. And the money has real value, even though it's just digital. Basically, it's digital money. But people have trust in it, so if you give it to me, I'll take it, and I'll give it to somebody else, and they'll take it, and therefore I have access. It's an instrument of power for me. I can buy food, I can buy clothes, I can purchase an automobile, whatever. But it just seems to me it's thinking about anything taken to extremes may end us up in a dark place. This gets to an instinct about balance and moderation. On the Western side, I think back to Aristotle and his notion of a balance, of a golden mean between extremes. And then the Confucian side, we have the document called the doctrine of the mean meaning the sort of like the average. Don't go too far to the right or too far to the left. Don't go up too high, don't go too low. In the Quran, we have a concept of the balance or mizan. So in the moment where you have to respond to a crisis, maybe you need to do extreme things. But then where is the sense of responsibility to be aware, first of all, that you're acting with extremes? And then so secondly, you want to have, the phrase comes to mind, a gentle glide path back to normal, back to a median, but we're still living with trillions and trillions of dollars which were put into the global economy in 2009 and through quantitative easing after 2009. If you look at the balance sheet of central banks recently around the world, there's a spike that just goes up like this. And my worry is that basically governments have created too much what is called fiat currency. And at some point, people are, they're not going to know what to do with it because it's just too much. The second factor, which worries me, but I'm not an economist or a financial person, is that when you flood an economy with lots of liquidity, most of it ends up with the top 10%. And what do they do with it? They invest it in financial assets, in stocks and bonds. They use it to speculate in derivatives and in forward exchange contracts and options. And while some of them lose money to others, in general, the top 10% makes money. So I haven't seen any big thinkers or great thinkers worrying about the connection between all this money that's been flooding us for a decade and the declining status of the middle class and the increasing inability of the lower class to make headway.